Hey Sarah, good to see you as always. Thanks for giving us a bit of time to come and have a chat about what you're doing. Um, let's just kick this conversation off with a question about the moment that you thought your business, CeraThrive, could become a global player. Tell us about that moment when you thought, I've got something could be quite impactful here. Tell us about that.
I don't know if there's been a specific moment, but it has been dawning on me kind of gradually as I go
Right.
through the process. Because initially, when I started up the company, um, we just had a really good idea, and it really came from research that I was doing and evidence that I'd seen for myself that this technology works. But I think what we have as a unique selling point is we target the gut and the brain at the same time. And I think I've started to see more and more and more about it in the news. I've started to get more and more anecdotal reports and a few kind of copycats too. So that kind of made me think, you know what, we really have hit on something here.
Yeah.
And that is reinforced to me every day, actually.
And for the people that are listening, presumably your technology, which you might just want to tell us a little bit about, presumably your technology addresses a problem that is global.
Yeah, I mean, I started out in neurodegeneration, so I started out in Parkinson's research. Uh, but I also do a lot with all kinds of conditions. But I want to make the caveat right before we start that this is not a medical device. This is a wellness product. But what we're doing is tackling the root cause of ill health.
Okay.
So really, although we're not a medical device, there are so many things that can be helped. And actually, I've recently coined my own term because I'm not a doctor. I'm not allowed to speak about illness, but I've coined my own term, which is RISE syndrome.
And tell me about that? What does that
So
mean?
RISE is reduced infrared spectrum exposure disorder.
Oh, right.
Reduced infrared. So what I'm saying is a lot of the malaise or a lot of why people feel unwell at the moment is because they're not getting exposed to certain wavelengths of light that are present naturally in the environment.
Okay.
And then I can kind of go on to list, okay, if you're not exposed to these wavelengths of light, what does that mean for you? Well, it can mean things like stress, sleeplessness, general unease, gut issues, brain issues, all of these various things. Because as humans, we are meant to be exposed to a lot of different wavelengths of light. So the way that I'm explaining it to people is um, it's a bit like scurvy at sea, Before we knew that it was vitamin C deficiency, people were just getting unwell and we didn't know why. Now we know that that is a
Okay.
lack of vitamin C in your diet causes a lot of different conditions. And the way that you can address that is by supplementing vitamin C.
Hmm.
It's the same with light. We now have a lot of different conditions that sometimes people are almost unaware of. I meet so many people who have kind of low level gut issues or low level brain issues that they're just accepting as part of life. And I think it's because as humans, we're just not exposed to these different wavelengths of light.
Don't spend enough time outside, do we?
We just don't spend enough time outside and we don't spend enough time outside at the right times of day.
Yeah. So
So
go on, sorry, for you
I was
finish.
going to say, so that's my way of dealing with when people ask, what is it for? And I'm not allowed to say medical conditions. Really anything where you are feeling this kind of general under the weather unease, but it does then manifest as chronic long-term diseases, long term if you leave it.
Sure. Okay. So you realized what you're saying to me is you realized that this it's a global problem. Your technology can help people with that.
Mhm.
Tell us about how you then went about making that come true. How did you develop an approach to have a global impact? Give us your thoughts on on that process.
Yeah, well, the approach is, it seems fairly simplistic. We have an epidemic of people that are not exposed to the correct wavelengths of light, and it's making everybody
Right.
ill.
Yeah.
The solution is find a technology that will then supplement these wavelengths of light. And that can be relatively easily done. We have had huge advancement in the way that we can deliver light to the body in the form of LEDs. Very simple, very easy to get hold of. It's now a big industry of people making these medical grade LEDs that you can then supplement. This is
Yeah.
called red light therapy. So initially, my strategy was just to present myself at a manufacturer of these LED devices and just kind of say to them, what do you think about this idea? Has it got legs? Can you do it for me?
Right.
And I think my the way that I was able to achieve this so quickly and easily is because the manufacturers were actually very keen and bought into the idea very quickly and became my business partners.
Okay.
So, so really that is how CeraThrive has come about because it's a collaboration between myself with the scientific knowledge and the manufacturer of a lot of these red light therapy devices, which is a great partnership because it enables us to kind of do things, very quickly and easily. And actually the device that I had made was designed by the manufacturer and made by them. And I was able to use their resource for even things like packaging and logistics.
Right.
And so we were kind of ready to go well, it still took a couple of years to get to market, but at least we had the resources available fairly quickly.
Mm. And is your plan? I mean, I know you're doing a lot because we were just talking about it, doing a lot in the US at the moment. I mean,
Mhm.
is your main focus the US market? I mean, I think you're quite ambitious, actually. I think it's probably broader than that, isn't it?
Yeah, at the moment we're kind of pan global. As you can probably tell, I'm British. My manufacturers are Dutch. The directors are all Dutch.
Right.
They have factories in China and India. I have staff in Europe, South Africa, and Canada and
Mm,
US.
wow. Okay.
I have
So,
an office in the US. I'm looking to set up an office in London. So actually, the market is global. There is a big market in the US for sure, because there are a lot of people there and
mm,
actually they're very open to new ideas. So I started by prioritizing the US market. But
mm,
actually, I'm finding that there is a lot of interest in other markets. I mean, even today, I had a meeting with my team and we're getting a lot of traction from Australia, for example.
yeah.
So I'm not limited to the US in any capacity.
Just a good place to start, I guess,
It's
if
just
they're if
yeah,
they're
it's just a
receptive
huge
to.
market. I mean, there's a lot of people in the US, and also, like I said, it, they have a slightly different health structure in that, they pay out of pocket for a lot of the things that they do anyway with their health. So it means it's maybe an easier market to
Mm,
start with, which is what I did. Mainly, my main audience to start with was the US, but now I would say it's kind of a fairly equal split between
mm.
US and Europe and UK, bunching them together.
Right. Okay. And I mean, one of the interesting things about the idea of small teams building big global footprints, which is what really the show's about. I mean, one of the interesting things about that is the fact that you've got. I mean, you've already talked about how you've got a team spread all over the place. I mean, that's quite a difficult management challenge anyway, and it's also difficult in the sense that. I mean, one is you've got a team that's spread out, and then you've also got a lot of jurisdictions. You're selling into lots of different places. I mean, just give us your thoughts on how you build a team. How do you put a team together that is able to deal with those challenges? Remotely spread and targeting lots of different countries, jurisdictions. I mean, what's your take on building a high performance team in that context?
I think actually I've been working with international teams for a long time, long before I started this
Right.
company, actually. Previous positions that I had, it was always well, certainly always UK and US. And then also, Australia, I've always kind of had connections there and been working there. And I think for me, that part wasn't so difficult. Actually, managing people across, I mean, now, you and I, we're in England, but we're still talking on Zoom. We could be anywhere at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think from that point of view, it's not so difficult. There are some cultural differences, and actually, I find that the cultural differences can be a little bit tricky, especially between UK stroke Europe and US. I think that Europe and UK are closer, and also Australia are more closer culturally. So
Mm.
sometimes there are little things there. But I think the biggest thing really is just the regulatory side. And as long as you've got an expert or someone who can really deal with the regulatory side, actually everything else is relatively simple, especially if, like me, you're starting small. You know,
Yeah.
I have contractors. I don't employ people at this early stage. People are happy to come on board as a contractor. So I don't have
Mm.
a really onerous HR task to do there.
Mm.
Like I say, I'm very open to using any of these kind of online meetings and things like that. I have a lot of systems in place which enable people to work at all kinds of times of day. So from my point of view, having an international team that is is no problem and no different actually from having people nationally. I think that from what I've seen and how I've been working, I haven't been going to an office for years. You know, I haven't gone
Mm.
to an office for years and years and years where you have that kind of culture where you go in and you sit at a desk and you kind of everyone does that. I mean,
Yeah. No,
probably 10 years I
I mean
haven't
that
done that.
big shift really happened at COVID, didn't it? But I mean, like you, I mean, we were working remotely for the 10 years prior to COVID. I mean, some companies it's not a new thing. I mean, there's an awful lot of people that it is new to, but it was not new to a lot of people, I don't think. And in terms of that context where you're managing a remote team, obviously you've got to you need a team that performs at a reasonably high level because you haven't got a lot of spare. You haven't got, I've got a couple of spare people that can go and do that. You haven't got that when
No.
you've got a small team. I mean, what's your take on how you create high performance, how you manage for performance? I mean, what's your sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've kind of very organically got pulled my team together. And I've what I've found, and I maybe, I mean, I have a podcast where I call myself the rebel scientist, Paul. So you're maybe, I'm kind of on the more rebellious side. Maybe you're not going to kind of get the answers from me. Also, I have no business training, you know, so the way that I'm doing things is perhaps not typical. And I kind of have a philosophy that if you just kind of put the blinkers on and go for what you think is the right thing, that people are going to kind of come into your space that kind of match your vibe and match your energy. And that's exactly really how I've built up the team. I mean, I mentioned to you that I partnered with the manufacturers. So already there, I had a group of people who were on board and supporting, and who I was able to kind of allocate different tasks to. But independent of that, I now have a team that's kind of allocated to CeraThrive and who are full time on CeraThrive, but they've organically come to me. You know, I had someone
Mm.
who reached out to me on LinkedIn, Chantel, who's my kind of right hand woman, if you like. She does marketing, business development. We kind of give her different titles depending on what she's doing. But she came to me through LinkedIn. We met up in London. We had a coffee instantly. You know, I knew that she was going to be the person for the job because the enthusiasm is there, the creativity is there. The rest of the stuff we can, you know, outsource, or it can be taught, or we can find things. And that's exactly how that's panned out. And that's really how the rest of my team have come on board. I have a head of clinical, actually someone who used my device. He has motor neurons disease, Seb. He used my device for 6 months, got amazing results, was so convinced by it that was such an advocate that he wanted to come on board and do, you know, help with the support of that. So, you know, the people who I have working on the team are hugely committed, enthusiastic, and
Mm.
as it turns out, you know, very highly skilled. So that is how I've built up my team, and how I continue to do so. You know, I just have a sales lady who's come on board. She's someone who I've known from different conferences. We had a chat in Miami. Again, very switched on, enthusiastic, self-sufficient person. So I think from my point of view, I just keep every day, I just get up and I just keep doing the best I can. I kind of focus on what I'm doing, and people kind of come in my orbit that seem to support that mission.
Mm.
So that's what's working for me so far. I don't know how that's going to go when as the team scales and grows. You know, we're going to have more um, criteria in place, or we're going to have different ways of recruiting. But at the moment, you know, we're a very small team, and everything's happened very organically.
Yeah. No, I mean that sounds, I mean, a really good way to do things to me. I mean, Yeah, and it's clearly working. And
Yeah.
at one level, that's what matters, isn't it, really? And the role of the CEO in that context. I mean, I always think, this idea of small team, big global footprint. I mean, one of the challenges is building a team. Another challenge is the role of the CEO because there's nowhere to hide. I mean,
Yep.
you've got to make sure that you stay focused on the horizon, but you've also got to fix problems that
Yes.
arise inevitably. You've got to put
Yeah.
out fires, which means that the job of the CEO is pretty challenging. I mean, that's certainly my reading of it. I mean, what's your take on that? I mean, how do you feel about the role?
Yeah, I think it is. Well, first of all, you can't do everything, right? That's one thing that I've learned, and to get really granular into something means, something else is slipping.
Yeah,
So from my point of view, I do try to keep like a global view, but I think the CEO really has to just keep constant to the mission. And so keep an eye on everything, but keep pulling things in, but to let people run with their own thing.
yeah,
Marketing, I've just had to kind of say, okay, you've got to run with it. Every now and then I'll check in. And for instance, last week I could see it was kind of steering off to a different thing. So we have weekly meetings, and it's like, okay, this weekly meeting, we're going to focus on what is our exact mission. Everyone bring your mission statements. Let's make sure that they all align so that we can then, and that did work, it tightens things up. Then the marketing's like, all right, oh, I can see. Yeah, maybe we steered off the mission. Let's kind of bring that back in. The same with logistics, that's a huge animal that I'm kind of trying to tame right now, but I do need to bring in resource to do that. I just have to kind of keep my eye on it all the time. So really, I mean, again, you're maybe asking somebody who's kind of learning as they go along. But the way I see being a CEO is just to keep the plates spinning. Try not to have too many plates, but to just keep an eye on all of them as they go, but to let people do their jobs. Because otherwise, if I really did try to know everything about the business, there's just no way that you could have someone steering the ship.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't really care what it says in the textbooks. I mean, I'm interested in what works, and I
Yes.
mean, what you've described is something that works. I mean, one of the other interesting things about being the CEO that will structure is, I mean, it's a bit of a roller coaster, isn't it? I mean, there's good days and there's bad days.
Yes.
I mean, what is it that motivates you to kind of leap out of bed first thing in the morning and get stuck in again? I mean, what's the, what is it that enables you, that motivationally, that keeps you focused on riding that roller coaster?
Um, well, I think the industry that I'm in, which is alternative health, let's call it alternative health. I mean, it's a great industry to be in because every day I get success stories from people who
Right.
are using my device. And I mean, I really have amazing feedback from people. And I'm in a very, very fortunate position. At any time of day, I can look at my phone. I've got like 4 or 5 different channels, Telegram, Slack, WhatsApp, anything. And
Yeah.
on one of those channels, there's going to be someone coming to me and saying, I've used red light therapy. It's really helped with this. Can you help with this? Or I get testimonials, or I get, people who are getting relief from their symptoms. So actually, for me, it's very easy to maintain that motivation.
Mm.
Also, I get to meet fabulous people on the daily. It's not just, oh, I go to an event and I meet lots of people. It's not like that at all. I do trainings and webinars and conferences, and I daily meet the most amazing people. So, so for me, it's really very easy to be highly motivated because it's a fascinating field too. I'm not just kind of selling something that I don't believe in. I'm selling a technology which could revolutionize people's health.
Yeah.
So what's not to laugh about doing that
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I totally get that, and that's it's good to hear that, that's what motivates you. One of the other interesting challenges about this small team, large footprint thing
Hmm.
is how do you keep track of customer expectations? I mean, my experience is customer expectations they change all the time, but they only go one way, which is up. I mean, what's your take on managing customer expectations? Because that's at the heart of how you stay competitive, how you get
Yes.
an edge on other people coming into the market? I mean, give us your take on the kind of customer expectation, customer relationship angle.
Well, there's a lot of new tools that are available now that weren't even available last year. Like I now have
Mm.
a chat bot on my site that I can put all of my frequently asked questions into, and it's actually very good. If
Right.
somebody can write something like, um, is this safe for children? And then they can get an answer with references and get everything straight away. Also, I have tech which enables, doesn't matter if somebody writes to me on Instagram or WhatsApp or email or anything, there are platforms now that will take that and it will go straight to my customer support manager, Crystal, who's awesome. And she will either deal with that or it will give an automated response before that at least replies to the person and gives them some information. I have an avatar. I've just made an avatar that I can program in with all kinds of things, webinars, the whole lot, so people also feel like a personal response.
Mm.
So I think at the moment there's just a lot of technology that's helping out with that kind of customer service angle. Plus, I have a very dedicated team, like I say, Crystal, who manages all my customer support. She, she's totally on it, and anything that she can't work out, she'll highlight straight away. And even putting out information ahead of time, because in my industry the thing that's most important is education,
Mm.
because people don't know what they don't know, and they don't know that there's an alternative sometimes to what they're looking for. Most people are very locked in a pharmaceutical mode and they don't even know that there is an
Mm.
alternative.
Mm.
So from my point of view, trying to preempt that by doing webinars and podcasts, and I do my own podcast weekly. I interview other people. I do trainings and webinars. I try and preempt some of what people are going to ask.
Mm.
But you're right. I mean, it's always nerve-wracking when, if people have got questions, or if people are like, oh, I asked this question and I didn't get an answer, or I wanted the device tomorrow and it took
Yeah.
5 days. It's always nerve-wracking when that happens. But I think there's just so much tech now that helps.
Yeah.
And I have to try not, I try not to kind of take it too personally when I get one or two people, where I haven't been able to meet that expectation. Because sometimes people, people want things tomorrow and they want everything with bells on. And there is only so much you can do as you're growing. But every time I get something like that, it kind of triggers us to say, okay, could we offer expedited shipping? How would we do that? Let's quickly put something in.
Yeah.
So you have to see it as an opportunity. But yeah, I think now, I mean, I don't know what you think, but that, like, this whole AI thing is just getting crazy good at helping businesses to kind of deliver and give people information that they need.
Yeah. No, no, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I think a lot of what's happening with AI is really, really interesting. I mean, it's going to
Hmm.
shake things up for quite a lot of people, but
Yeah.
it's really interesting. And there's a lot of it at the front end in the sense of there's a lot of AI being deployed to build relationships with customers, support
Yes.
customers, and whatever. It's all good stuff, I think. Um, Let me just following on from that though. One of the other challenges is the kind of look, you're doing business in America, very different from doing business in Singapore or doing business in Germany. I mean, how do you keep track of the kind of cultural nuances when you're working in lots of jurisdictions? I mean, how do you do that, and how do you help your team deal with that as well? Because it'll be a challenge for them as well, I thought.
Yes, it is. There are cultural differences, but like I said, we are a very international team. And
Mm.
actually, I think most people who are kind of working at this international level are used to dealing with people from all different cultures.
Yeah.
Like I say, my Dutch colleagues, we all spend a lot of time in the States. So we kind of have different ways that we talk to people, in the marketing. We kind of have a few rules of thumb, how Americans want, much more kind of the language is a little bit more flowery, it's a little bit more
Mm.
direct here in EU, maybe it's a bit more showy in the States. Here we kind of have more factual, um, like on the marketing side. But most of the time, because we are a small business, we're not changing a great deal. The website is the same.
Right.
And actually, I think now a lot more people are used to that more international way of working and kind of used to seeing,
Mm.
here in England, maybe people are more used to seeing that kind of more American style.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, actually, certainly in the UK. Um, you know, and again, just to kind of go back a step, I mean, if you were thinking about going into a new market, let's say you're not selling in Singapore, but you want to sell in Singapore, for example. I
Mhm.
mean, how would you approach those challenges? I mean, do you spend a lot of time sort of working out a market entry strategy, which of course is the kind of conventional wisdom, or do you just follow the kind of responses from customers? I mean, what's your take on kind of going into new jurisdictions, new countries?
Well, like you say, I'm not kind of primed with what I should be doing. Uh, maybe to my detriment. But what I tend to do is have good partnerships.
Okay.
So actually, I do have a partnership in Singapore, but I'm thinking mainly like recently I was on a call with a lady from Colombia. She knows her market very well. So I can support there by supporting her. So what I tend to do is I have people in those, maybe distributors or maybe not even distributor level, but just resellers, but I tend to use people who are in the area already, and then I support them.
And they
So
have the local
they set
knowledge,
up the
don't
webinars
they?
how they want them to be set up, and then I come on and answer questions. In a lot of places like South America, they want to have the information in Spanish.
Mm.
So, I have some of my app in Spanish. We normally do the webinars in the Spanish language and then they'll translate for me. So I tend to use people who are already in the country
Right.
in that instance.
Yeah. I mean, quite a few people that have been on the show have talked about the importance of building partnerships in the different jurisdictions, but which also opens a question. I mean, if that's the strategy, I mean, what's your take on negotiating the kind of deal with those partners? I mean, my experience is if you can get it right, it works brilliantly, but if you don't get the right deal, it doesn't work. Nothing works. I mean, what's your take on kind of negotiating with those partners, getting to a point where you've got a relationship that you know will work? I mean, what's your sort of take on that? Because that challenge is
There's a
something that keeps
challenge.
repeating.
It's a challenge, and like that's where the cultural differences come in, and also where the kind of the economy of the various different regions comes in too. Because what's going to kind of work for somebody in Coconut Grove in Miami is not going to work for someone in Puerto Rico or in Colombia, for example. So we have to try and really work out a way that works. Actually, you're asking this with me coming off a call with a distributor with um in Colombia, and I think it is going to take a little bit of to and froing. But my proposal is to just start small, because if you can start small and kind of get something going, you can start to see how you can then scale and then maybe do like a more refined agreement. So from my point of view, the negotiation is initially just to get the person started and to make sure there's a market there before you commit, because everybody wants exclusivity.
Yeah,
Everybody kind of wants to get the best deal. And for a lot of people, that becomes a block. They won't start until they sign off on the
yeah,
exclusivity. So that to me is a big challenge. Like I say, I do try and use people with more experience in negotiation, but sometimes it comes back because they just want to talk to the CEO.
yeah,
So I'm finding, I try to do a more softly approach where I just get people to get started. I provide as much service as I can in that initial phase to see if it's going to get off the ground.
yeah. And I,
But
and I
it's
guess
very difficult.
starting small, reduces the risk, doesn't it?
It reduces the risk and it gives you a way to kind of gauge how it's going to go and if it's got legs to kind of put more resource into. Because a lot of people are coming with very grand ideas and
Mm,
kind of big numbers, but you kind of need to see whether, okay, is this actually a market, or is this just something where I'm going to get locked in to an agreement for a couple of
mm,
years and then it doesn't actually go where that person intended? Because with the best will in the world, you really just need to try something to make sure it's working before you get that right. But that I would say that's probably one of my biggest challenges, Paul, is to kind of do these international deals where you're kind of being very cognizant of the economics and the culture, but at the same time not over committing because you want to get that deal done and the money coming in.
yeah,
It's a balancing act,
yeah,
and it's something that I'm kind of trying to to do very slowly, but at the same time, I don't want to halt the growth of the company by not accepting
Yeah. I
distributors.
mean, inevitably you have to take a bit of risk, don't you?
Yeah, you have to take a bit of risk, and you have to decide. My kind of theory is, okay, if there's promise there at the beginning and the sales are coming, the risk is a little bit less.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, and to come back to the conversation we had earlier about the role of the CEO, I mean, in one sense, that's a judgment that only the CEO can make.
Mm, yes.
Certainly at this point in the,
Yeah.
in the development of the company, which makes it interesting but challenging, as you've just pointed out. So let me just ask you a couple of other things before we wind this up. I mean, it's been a fascinating conversation. I mean, when you look back on the journey, um, what would you say you've learned, and has that changed you?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, I kind of came from a research background straight into entrepreneurship, and it is a journey for sure. And I think it's changed me in actually, I think positively, because it starts off as this monumental task and there is a lot of responsibility. Um, and from my point of view, the only way that I could deal with it is to kind of let go a little bit of the control of it. And otherwise I could see myself slipping into overwhelm
Okay.
because I thought, okay, this is either gonna the only way that I can actually run this company is to kind of let go, is kind of let people do their own thing, get up, do my best every day. But at the same time, I'm a health company, so I have to kind of lead by that example. So I have to take my breaks and do my walks and also look after my own mental health. So
Yeah.
from my point of view, that is the journey in that you do need to a little bit kind of be very cognizant of your own limitations. Make sure you're bringing on people who have got more skill than you, but you can kind of at least keep that ship going and just keep the blinkers on
Mm.
and just keep getting up and doing it again and again every day. And so far for me, that mentality is working out. But that's not something actually that I've been used to doing. I have
Right.
before, especially in science, I've kind of been very right, I'm going to kind of do this to the best of my ability and then completely finish the task and move on. But sometimes that's not possible, and you have to be okay with that. So for me, it's been a lot of learning, but actually, I've enjoyed it. And I do think it's for the better, actually. I do feel a lot better about my working life
Would
than I did before.
would you say your personality is better suited
Better suited.
to
Um,
entrepreneurship rather than research?
No, not necessarily, actually. I think my skill set is still research. I still a little bit feel like I'm kind of fumbling along and finding my feet.
Right. Okay.
But my staff and my investors and my team, I do make sure that I'm asking for constant feedback. I'm not just kind of running away with things. And the feedback is very positive. So I just keep asking for feedback, adjusting, moving forward.
Mm.
So from my point of view, I always think that I'm better at the research side.
Right.
Uh, um,
But maybe being good at the research, being good at asking questions, asking customers what they think, what they would find useful, etc., etc. I mean, that's informing what you're doing. So it seems to me it'd be a pretty positive kind of upward spiral.
yeah, and sometimes, maybe it's about kind of doing what needs to be done at the start, and maybe like longer term as the company scales, maybe I would move back into a more research science side.
Yeah.
From my point of view, especially with startup companies, you just need to get the company to a point where it's viable and scalable, and that's kind of where I'm at. It could well be that I find a brilliant CEO. I'm not totally precious about what I'm doing. I'm very happy to kind of move over if someone could do this position better. It's just
Mm.
I'm the best person for this right now because
Sure.
I have the knowledge and we're a small team and we need to scale.
Sure.
But that's not to say that I, would not move to the side if there was a CEO to take over. I think lots of people come to me and ask me, what round I'm in and, lots of these big business questions. But actually, I think I've seen a lot of companies around me that started at a similar time who are not around anymore. And I think sometimes people get carried away with trying to be a massive company too soon.
Yeah.
And really, I think we're in a sort of a climate that doesn't really favor small businesses. Um, and from my point of view, to kind of do the groundwork and have a stable, scalable company to start with is probably where where we're at right now, rather than kind
Mm.
of trying to do something, where you need to have this very very corporate structure in at the start. But then, the company doesn't always make it. From my point of view, starting off small, staying small, perhaps then when we can scale, bringing in the resource that you don't have, that's our strategy. That's how we're doing it.
The thing that I think is really powerful about what you're saying is that focus on the customer. I mean, without customers, businesses are they're not businesses, are they really? I mean, they're
No.
something else. As what you're saying is that you're very focused on the customer. I mean, whatever the textbooks say, I mean, it seems to me to be a pretty sensible thing to do. And your other point actually about that not being a particularly favourable environment for small businesses at the moment. I mean, I think a lot of entrepreneurs would agree with that. It's pretty tough for a lot of people at the moment. But that ongoing focus on customers has got to be a good thing for the. So
Yeah, and keeping small and scalable, like I say, not having this because it isn't very favorable. Sometimes when I'm in these meetings about the logistics and the duties, and I think, oh my goodness, is anyone, able
yeah,
to do this? But you find a way and you kind of make it work. But, like I say, I've known quite a few people who haven't, and really just to keep your eye on, okay, well, this is a technology, it is needed, it's something important in the world. This is where we're at. Just keep going, rather than, wanting to be $1 million, a unicorn, the whole thing so much. That I don't keep in my mind so much. I'm more about, okay, let's make sure that this is a scalable business to start with. Then, you can kind of set your eyes on all the unicorn stuff afterwards. But it's just about day to day having the sales coming in that you need to
yeah.
keep the
I mean,
business
if you build it
scaling.
seems to me if you build a great business, you're far more likely to end up as a unicorn than if you build a terrible business. I mean, I know that's rather simplistic, but I mean, I think that's probably true. A couple of final questions. Anything that you know now that you wish you knew when you started?
I wish I knew all of the logistics about getting in and out of all the different countries and how difficult that would be, because I would have started
Yeah,
that process and got an expert in a lot sooner with that,
yeah,
because that's been my major headache.
yeah,
And yeah, like, that's something where I mean, I'm sure there's people who've done PhDs and degrees on that and still are no further on. And it's amazing how little resource there is for things like that.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you're saying about international business, there is actually very little information about the actual logistics of running that, and very few people who want to touch it, actually.
Yeah,
And
you're
even the
absolutely right.
banking side, people, you think, oh yeah, there's loads of people doing international business. This is going to be easy. It's not at all.
No.
Banks, most of the big banks are not at all set up for international, even though they will tell you that they are.
It's never
And
that simple, is it?
it's ridiculously complicated considering that we live in a world which is kind of so international in many other ways. So I wish before I'd started, I kind of had a bit more of an idea about how complex the logistics would have been, and I would have really put a lot more effort in that at the beginning, rather than now we're kind of catching up. But we are catching up. But that's definitely my biggest
And I
bugbear.
guess you learn those lessons along the way, don't you? Because by trying to figure out solutions, you learn how it works. Um,
Yes, for sure. And you spend hours on chat GBT, and you kind of spend hours on phone calls, and you
yeah,
have all different companies that can do just one little piece of it, and you have
yeah,
to kind of pull them all together to make something that actually works. So yeah, you do it as you go along. But yeah, it's been a bit painful.
sure, yeah. One last thing. What advice would you perhaps offer to somebody else if they were going to start on your journey? I mean, what would you say to somebody?
I would say maybe to kind of have a focus and not do things too big to start with. Let's say we went global from the very beginning. I mean, our
Mm,
first 100 orders were going all over the world. But I think maybe to start smaller, maybe doing one area, then scaling one product, then
yeah,
another one. That probably would have been a more sensible way to go, and maybe that would be how I would do it if I was going to start again.
right.
Um, it's just to be very focused, I think, is the secret. Because a couple of times I've also got a bit overexcited and I've thought of new products, and I'm like, yeah, this would if this would go, this would definitely go. But then of course you're diluting things. And
And there are only 24 hours in a day.
there are only 24 hours in the day, and I've found the biggest success comes with focus.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very, really powerful thing to end on, actually. I mean, my view is that exactly that. I mean, if you've only got 24 hours of the day and you're only going to spend X number of those, I don't know, 15 or whatever it is at work, you want to make get the maximum impact out of those 15 hours, which means focusing. And I don't think you can avoid that. And I think actually I mean, successful entrepreneurs tend to be pretty focused people, you
I
know.
think they must be because, like you said, because it's easy to get carried away, isn't it? There are so many
Yeah.
brilliant ideas out there and so many new ways of doing things and so many flashy new techs to try and systems, the whole thing. But the more you can focus, the more you get done. And
Yeah.
then, you can kind of build on it. But it's difficult. I mean, it's not to say, I mean, I haven't been distracted by a million, people are million different platforms and things that are going to help and ideas
Yeah.
and of course the team also, they're also sending me, why, maybe we could be in airport lounges. I'm like, yeah, maybe we could. But why don't we just kind of
Yeah.
let's just make sure we can do what we say we're going to do first with the clinics before we start to branch out. But I think that's another kind of thing we're facing at the moment. It's a little bit of overwhelm of information that
Yeah.
we're dealing with. And to keep focused in that almost seems a little bit like like you're not being creative, but actually to have that focus really, really does help to kind of get things done, especially initially.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sarah, thanks for sharing that story. I mean, fascinating, great products, very exciting times, I think, and lots of great opportunities on the horizon for you, no doubt. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing the story, and good luck. Good luck going forward. And I hope we'll speak again soon.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for having me on. I know I'm a little bit unconventional in my take, but I hope that was useful for you.
Absolutely, unconventional's good in my book. All right, see you soon, Sarah.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.